This video is brought to you by the lovely members of my patrons, and thank you to all of the new people who have joined. This weekend, I, like most queer folk, decided to watch Happiest Season, the new Christmas rom-com that has the very specific distinction of being the first major Hollywood Christmas movie featuring a lesbian couple, and is also directed by a lesbian, Clea Duvall, and starring several queer actors. It has caused a lot of discourse for good reason, so we will get into that and all the issues surrounding the movie. Kristen Stewart, in probably her most charming performance to date, stars as an orphan, because I keep bringing that she's an orphan young woman named Abby, who is dating Harper Mackenzie Davis. Harper decides to invite Abby home for Christmas and then drops the bomb during the car ride there, mind you, that she hasn't come out to her family yet.
I was going to, and then my dad told us that he was running for mayor, and it just didn't feel like the right time. And then now he's trying to get the support of this donor, and our whole Christmas is about impressing this person, which is stressing my mom out.
Okay. On top of that, she also wants Abby to pretend to be straight because her father, played by Victor Garber, is running for mayor, and Harper and her sisters, Sloane, Allison Brie, and Jane, aka the best angel, sweetest angel, deserves everything, have always had to compete for their parents' love and affection. Therefore, Harper is like, can't tell him I'm gay right now. During this, Abby feels more and more isolated and distant from Harper, and then enters Aubrey Plaza's Riley, making all of us tingle in ways we haven't tingled in a long time.
Looks like it's just us ladies. Now, I don't know about you, but I am single and ready to mingle, so.
And honestly, it's refreshing because Gillian Anderson as Margaret Thatcher has fucked up our libidos. We needed this to like rebirth it. So there are two main issues that the film has brought up in the discourse. One, the politics of coming out, and two, if Abby made the right decision in picking Harper over Riley. Firstly, I think Harper's fear of coming out is very relatable and extremely valid. This year is actually the first year in my life that I have been open to my father about my bisexuality. My mother knew, my sisters knew, my brother, my close friends, everyone on YouTube knew before him, and of course my same-sex and opposite-sex partners knew that, but I kept it from my dad because he and I have always had a very special relationship, and I was genuinely frightened of risking that. The only thing that made me ultimately do it was being on Lexapro, the fact that I was moving out, and this deep Aries like need to just get it over with and pick a fight, kind of like pick at the wound. And luckily he accepted me almost too casually. It's kind of anticlimactic. I was kind of disappointed, but regardless, I totally understood where Harper was coming from. That anxiety is so real. How I felt about coming out before I came out is completely different than how I felt when I realized that I was gay and had to then come out. What Dan Levy's character says about that anxiety in your chest and that feeling in that chapter is so true to how I felt. And so in that regard, I totally understand Harper. I'm not penalizing her for that. Where she royally fucked up was how she treated Abby and her inability to really communicate constructively in a very toxic environment that was of her own creation. It is one thing to not come out to your parents and wanting to stay in the closet for your own sense of peace and security. Not everyone gets to come out. Not everyone has the opportunity to come out, and honestly, not everyone is entitled to know everything about your own queer experiences. But how you treat your partner when you bring them into those environments definitely absolutely matters. Harper should have told Abby, period. Also, putting Abby in the closet was totally uncalled for because that's not Harper's call to make. Plus, Harper kept not calling out her parents, who were being habitual boundary steppers, bringing up Abby's dead parents. And the final straw for me was when Harper ends up going out all night with her friends and her generic ex-boyfriend that doesn't know that she's queer because no one in her friend group seems to know that. And when Abby is very rightly mad about it, Harper calls her controlling.
Feels a little suffocating.
I'm suffocating you?
Or not, but just...
Oh, I feel really suffocated in the closet that you shoved me back into.
You agreed to this.
Yeah, we were practically already here.
Can you please?
And honestly, it reminded me of all of the poly Facebook groups I was at where everyone's response to their partner being upset about an action that you did is like, well, they're responsible for their own feelings. Do y'all not care about the relationships you build with people sometimes? Like, Baron. Watching Harper attempt to gaslight Abby, it was some of the most delicious examples of actual gaslighting I've seen in a while. Like, for once, that term 100% applies to a situation. Harper was gaslighting AF. And this leads to the second thing in the discourse that has been brought up. Harper eventually realizing that she's a shit, coming out to her family, apologizing, and getting back together with Abby, who decides to take her back. People feel like this was the wrong call and Abby should have ended up with Riley.
How's it going?
Great.
I was just taking a break from diagnosing everyone's mystery illnesses.
Yes, we all like Riley. I like Riley. We all think Riley is hot, but the reality is that was never going to happen because Riley is just a hot honeypot played by Aubrey Plaza. Also, they had great chemistry, yes, but I think it's mostly because they're allowed to actually get along with each other, which, you know, helps in making you root for a couple. I actually felt like Harper and Abby had a ton of chemistry, but I'm also a sucker for like the tall girl, tiny girl dynamic. So like, I was like, this is cute. The real issue and the issue with the movie is that the narrative makes it impossible to see why they have been together for all this time, which is roughly unclear, and why this relationship is worth staying in for Abby despite all of these issues that have come up during this very highly intensive situation. Because yes, even when partners mess up big time, it doesn't always mean a deal breaker or a breakup, and it doesn't always mean that you want to end that relationship. It could mean that the relationship needs to change. One of the biggest moments I have discovered in a relationship is when you realize that despite a massive fuck up, you actually love someone enough to want to work and save what you have built together if both of you decide that it's worth working on. We don't really get any of that in Happiest Season. We just get all of the tension and none of the genuine beauty and love of what this relationship must mean to both of these women. That is probably the biggest issue I have with this entire movie, and it brought to my attention another movie with a slightly similar premise.
I want to get married.
Wow.
Jenny's Wedding is a 2015 romantic dramedy directed by Mary Agnes Donahue. It stars Katherine Heigl as the titular Jenny, who wants to get married to her longtime partner of 5 years, Kitty, played by Alexis Bledel before she got her gay glow up in The Handmaid's Tale. Jenny ends up coming out to her conservative Catholic family in Cleveland in order to get married to her partner.
You told me if you meet the right person, you should go the distance, and I did. I met the right person. Kitty.
Despite this movie being framed as a dramedy, it is not at all a comedy and isn't about Jenny and Kitty as a couple, as it is more about the interplay between Jenny and her family's dynamics about what her queerness means to them.
I know times have changed. Anything goes these days. I read the papers, I watch TV. But I don't know personally anybody in this neighborhood whose children have, you know.
What did we do wrong? Nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. This is just how I am.
But you're like me.
To the point where Kitty might as well be an orphan because her side of things do not matter. Kitty don't got no friends, she don't got no family, she got nothing. And Heigl and Bledel have negative chemistry and like often feel more like roommates than actual partners of half a decade. Like, their kisses suck. They like have no real sense of intimacy, especially because whenever Jenny has to have an awkward or tense conversation with her parents about her sexuality, Kitty always leaves or just stands in the corner.
You need to do this on your own.
What? I don't want to go in there.
This ain't about me. Jenny gives so many like of these impassioned speeches and monologues about her being happier now that she's out and what this means to her, but her relationship with Kitty is completely unimportant and underdeveloped, which is strange because this is the person that she wants to spend the rest of her life with, so much so that she's willing to come out of the closet in order to solidify the relationship. So this person is worth all of this disturbance to her family unit, which is why after watching Happiest Season and rewatching Jenny's Wedding, I needed to watch something that was about a queer relationship between two women, but had them be people and had their relationship be more important than just their smooching. Spoilers for Adventure Time Distant Lands. I talked about bubbling in my previous video about the future of LGBTQ representation, which has now finally gone over 100k views. Thank you so much for everyone who watched it. And I touched on how the kiss between Princess Bonnibel Bubblegum and Marceline the Vampire Queen was a validating moment for a lot of kids and adults and teens who saw that scene. I saw a few people call Bubblegum a fascist and also say that it was queer baiting, which I don't agree with. But when I watched the Adventure Time Distant Lands Obsidian episode, I was wondering how it was going to work on expanding both PB and Marcy as a couple, but also as people who are deeply flawed.
No, yuck. Thanks, you goof. Boo. I'm sorry, did I scare you?
So often queer representation stops at the kiss, at the official couple ending that makes it canon, but ignores that these are still complicated people with traumas. We've always been privy to Marcy's insecurities and PB's control issues, and just because they have been together for what seems like decades, because we get a glimpse of adult Finn and, you know, he grown. Just because things are good doesn't mean they go away. And what was really nice about this episode is that, you know, it reestablishes that Marceline is a black biracial person, just like her voice actress, which is cool, and that it had PB acknowledge that she still has deep insecurity flaws that she has to work on, and them solidifying that they are happy on working on being even better people for themselves and for each other as a couple.
I was sorta hoping your song wouldn't work, so I could finally show the Glass Kingdom how much of a scientific genius I am.
Well, mission accomplished. Being back here where all this bad stuff happened, my mom and I didn't talk about bad stuff. When she got really sick, she didn't even tell me. She meant well, but I think it messed me up about being honest about my feelings.
It was so good. I am sometimes like in awe that the best, most substantial queer representation overwhelmingly is consistently coming from shows targeted towards kids. I'm getting most of my best rep from cartoons, and I'm totally fine with that. And I think what I love the most about Obsidian and PB and Marceline and this is that it showed and proved, I think ultimately, that the only thing that was ever keeping them from acknowledging this other layer of Princess Bubblegum and Marcy was very much the powers that be at Cartoon Network, which has been a statement of fact forever. But this showed that now it's on HBO Max, they do have the freedom to just allow casual queerness, because their queerness has not been the direct focus of their stories. They have other things going on besides being gay. And I think that's kind of the hard thing about these movies that are just all about being gay. Being gay, despite how it may seem sometimes, is not a personality trait. Unless you're bisexual, then it is. I can self-drag. And the thing about Princess Bubblegum and Marceline is that because their narrative about their queerness has been so interwoven with their own character flaws, their character development has allowed them to grow into being better partners for each other. And with Obsidian, we see a long-term relationship learning to be healthy, being healthy, but problematic. What was sort of the thing about watching Happiest Seasons and leads into sort of my overall thoughts about the film is that it is ultimately a mediocre Christmas movie about the least marginalized type of queer folk. And that's okay, that's entertaining. I enjoyed it even though it filled me with so much anxiety. I love Jane. I hope there's a spin-off where Jane gets to be happy and paint and thrive with her best-selling series.
I don't have any secrets, but I am an ally.
It's fine to congratulate the milestones, but also acknowledge how lacking these milestones are, which is something I talked about in my previous video, again, that I mentioned before about queer rep. Not everyone wants to break up with their partners because they've had a fight. But we all know we wouldn't want an entire Twitter audience to be privy to some of the sacrifices, compromises that we have made in a relationship in order to have it function for both people, especially the more atypical it is. What is more important than Harper and Abby ending up together is that all of us collectively saw the toxicity and red flags in the relationship and could call them out for what they were. John did a great job of speaking to both Harper's authentic, realistic anxiety about coming out, but validating Abby's desire to be with someone who is out.
There's your version, and my version, and everything in between. But the one thing that all of those stories have in common is that moment right before you say those words, when your heart is racing and you don't know what's coming next. That moment's really terrifying.
That's fine. I think Harper should have definitely groveled so much more than she did, and a better movie would have basically spent more time showing why Harper and Abby's relationship worked as a couple, what made them so special to one another. The final thing that I will say is that I'm glad this movie isn't for everyone, but is still doing well. It's being spoken about, people are watching it, and that's good. I think that Happiest Season is like a charming, what as fuck rom-com with skinny people, a nice, you know, Michelle Buteau cameo for the culture, and with some LGBTQ saison over, you know, everything. It isn't elevating, like I said, the most marginalized bodies and existences and identities within the spectrum of queerness and in our queer community. And it also feels so strange how often drag is brought into these films when overall so much of it is so normative and cis. But I think it's fair to say that it is jarring how normative this is for being the first of something, but I'm not going to yuck the yum of people who feel seen by it. I felt seen by parts of it, and as long as you are watching it with the awareness of its flaws and what it's lacking in, I think it's fine. I feel like white femme queerness has sort of peaked in cinema with Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and with cartoons just in general delivering leaps and bounds over movies. I'm enjoying the content that we have, but I am waiting for film to catch up with what other genres seem to be understanding about dealing with queerness. I will probably revisit Happiest Season. I found it fun. I find it endearing. Like I said, I genuinely enjoyed the film, but I do think that I understand why people don't like it. I understand why people are like, I'm not annoyed by it. And honestly, most rom-coms have that same thing. There are people who like eat it up and lap up and have a favorite problematic one, and some people who don't. It's okay. And also, I am very comfortable, and I have gotten more comfortable being able to say, yes, I am judging this on a little bit of a curve because of what it is. I can acknowledge that because it's queer, I care more about it than I would if it was a straight rom-com. And honestly, if it actually had black people in it, if it had black people who were dark-skinned in it, whew, I would care a lot more. She says, even though she hasn't seen the photograph. I did watch The Lovebirds though. It's okay to admit that, yes, I like this movie a little bit more because it's woman loves women content. I am enjoying that. And if it was a hetero movie, it would be a different movie. It wouldn't be able to have a come out storyline. Like, these things are different depending on who you are. It's mediocre AF with a little bit of the saison that I like. We'll watch again. Better than Jenny's Wedding. No offense if you like Jenny's Wedding. It's not as terrible as I remember, but it's still like not good. What I do hope that we can stop doing is stop acting as though like we have to see like healthy quote unquote queer relationships all the time. Like, there should be variety, absolutely, but like conflict in genre is a part of storytelling. But I think people need to be better at doing conflict correctly and making sure there's a balance between the chaoticness of this couple and why they're together. I mean, like, if I compare this movie to The Lovebirds, what I do think was the big difference between the two is that I kind of did understand as the movie went together why these two people, like I said, they'd been together for a long time, they had like got caught in their ways, but when they were put in a situation, like, they were funny together and they clicked together. And I think that this movie could have used some more of that. And some more Michelle Buteau. Michelle Buteau and Hassan Minaj should be in a rom-com together. I would watch it. That would be entertaining. So anyway, if you haven't seen Happiest Seasons, it's on Hulu. Check it out if you feel like it. But if you don't, you're probably better off watching Adventure Time or She-Ra. Or Kipo, girl. You have, the cartoons is doing it. Y'all don't even know why we do this live action shit anymore. They don't know what they're doing.
You spend all of eternity with you.
Oh, so I decided that at the end of my credits, I would do a little something different. I asked my patrons if they had any questions for me. From Captain Haryana Hook, what's a show, live action, cartoon, or anime that everyone likes but you couldn't get into? That absolutely has to be the Harley Quinn show on DC Universe, now HBO Max app. Like, I know everyone loves it and I'm very glad that it eventually gave me Harley and Ivy, but the first season of that show I hated so much, and I feel so guilty because so many people I like and respect really love that show, and I want to give it another shot, but overall I just do not care for it. Screwtape X, I'm curious how you got started with YouTube and video essays, etc. So with YouTube, for those who may not know, because I've been on this YouTube thing for like over a decade, yikes, it started off with me just bashing Twilight because I was an angry 16-year-old, and the video essays have sort of come about from me wanting to do more long form content that's a little bit more structured, because I just feel like being like a very visible Black pop culture nerd, queer femme, I have a responsibility to try and make content that is well structured, because people use me as a resource, and I don't say that with any kind of vanity, just in general, and I really try my best to do right by those who support me, and I just felt like doing video essays, doing more structured content was just the best way to do that. Randy Rhinoceros asks, any graphic novels, comics that you feel are wildly underrated, underseen? I would say it's not necessarily comics or graphic novels, but I would say shoujo manga. Shoujo manga, I've been realizing as I get older, despite being very groundbreaking in terms of demographics and sales, I don't think it gets enough respect for the emotional weight that it brings to genre, what it does for its characters. So I have very much been on the shoujo deserves more love. Be Aggressive asked on Discord, what are your thoughts on LGBT content from outside of the States? I don't know much of it outside of the British shows that I watch. I would say that Sex Education has been overall, in terms of representation, very good. I know people have a lot of issues with different relationships that they've picked, and my partner, who is asexual, has a few thoughts about how they talk about aceness in the show, but overall I think that Sex Education is probably one of the most balanced, well done shows about that particular topic, so I am excited about it. And then Linda asked me on Patreon, how do you feel the boys have done with the Kimiko character? Super curious to hear your thoughts. Okay, so this is a really polarizing topic, I realize, because so many people really love Kimiko, and I love Kimiko too, but I think it's really important that we recognize that just because something is well done doesn't mean it still can't be somewhat problematic. And I think as Jimmy Wong, who does the Command Zone podcast and YouTube series, stated, like, it is a little unnerving when we see so many Asian characters who are in majority white or non-Asian casts be put into situations where they're supporting players, where they are nonverbal communicators, and their development takes longer to get to than their white counterparts. Like, yes, Kimiko has definitely developed a lot since her introduction, but that had a whole season where she was only known as the female, and now that's being fixed. And it reminds me of why, despite I know a lot of people feeling a way about it, I honestly think that the changes made to Cassandra Cain in the Birds of Prey movie were a good thing, because while yes, I totally understand why Cassandra Cain is so interesting, the trope of the, you know, young Asian woman who's very good at martial arts but not a good communicator and not good at social skills is a trope that is unfortunately rooted in how a lot of non-Asian writers have written Asian characters, especially women. So I like Kimiko. I think that it is taken in the best case good representation for nonverbal communicators when it comes to, you know, having her have a sign language that people are learning. With Frenchie, I love all of that, but I do think we need to be conscientious of the fact that it is a problematic trope that even when someone is doing an amazing job at it, it's still a trope.